Hi, I'm Ryan O'Dowd, and this is the Black Hand Communique. Today, I have a little bit of a different way of doing things. I've got a guest on my show named Joe. Say hi, Joe.
Hi.
Joe and I met a long time ago on Facebook in different activist circles and stuff, and been having kind of ongoing conversation for a long time about politics and all kinds of things. It's always sunny in Philadelphia, and whatever shared interests kind of come across our way. But today's episode is called Kopsick on Cooperatives, and I'm kind of offering a solutions-based episode today, as opposed to my usual just describing things and then getting overwhelmed and angry and rant about them. So today, I'll uh, I'll tell you what a cooperative is. We'll start there. Everyone knows what a business is, or they think they know what a business is. It's a private enterprise where one person or a group of people get together and they own something, and then they have employees that they pay who do not own the enterprise. And then most people know what a state enterprise is, which is the government extracts wealth from people and taxes, and then kind of forcibly organizes some kind of hierarchy or bureaucracy that then runs a certain business or economic part of the economy. And Joe is here to talk about cooperatives, which is neither a private, it's either neither a private business or a state business, or it's kind of somewhere in between the two of them, usually where the employees own, I understand, they own and they manage their own places of work. So with that, I'm going to let Joe go into it however he wants to, and I guess you could start by correcting me on whatever I just got wrong.
I think it's true that cooperatives are kind of either neither nor or either or, a mix of private or state enterprises, depending on how you define them. Something I always like to say is that private enterprises isn't necessarily state-controlled, state-governed, state-sanctioned enterprise with a for-profit motive. It can, if you define the private sector in a different way, it can include everything that's not outside, everything that is outside state control, and that can include the non-for-profit sector.
Yeah, let me interrupt you there. I think a lot of people in our country think that there's pretty much an exclusively fought battle between business and government. And my understanding is that what you're proposing with cooperatives and has been proposed by other people kind of mitigates the problems of both. Is that right?
Yeah, so I guess I'll start with, as you said, cooperative is a, quote unquote, depending on how you want to define it, is a privately owned. I mean, it's so difficult, but it's an enterprise that is owned and controlled by workers and operated for their interest, and they elect their own managers, or workers are their own managers.
Now, does that work like a representative democracy where they would kind of hire their management, or is it more like a direct democracy where they're all being canvassed to make decisions?
It can be either. There's something called a cooperative. You can have cooperatives. You can also have cooperative corporations. And let's actually the most famous cooperative of all is Mondragon in northern Spain. I was actually surprised to find out that the full name of the business is not Mondragon Cooperative, but Mondragon Corporation. So they do have outside investors, but when you have a cooperative organizing with other enterprises or other organizations, it operates in order to further its own interest and to maintain its independence and autonomy.
I see. In that, let's talk about Mondragon for a second, because I don't think everyone knows who that is out there. So is that sort of, you say they have outside investors? Is it still managed by the workers themselves? Like it's like investors that invest in a worker managed company? Is that how it works?
I think so. I don't know all that much about it, but here's what I do. Here's what I have found out. It's described as a corporation and also as a federation of worker cooperatives. And it is an international business. It was founded in 1956. The city is organized around it. There's Mondragon University, which is organized with it. The divisions of Mondragon include finance, industry, retail, and knowledge, which is the university. So they sell things, they make things, and they're involved in finance. And another example of a cooperative in America is a place that I've been to, Willie Street Co-op, which is a grocery store in Madison, Wisconsin. And cooperatives can be involved in a number of industries, anything from grocery stores, food stores, to healthcare, insurance, housing, utilities such as electric power, finance such as credit unions, and farming, agriculture, and forestry.
Oh, that's credit unions. That's an interesting. You should bring that up because my sister is was a teacher, so she's part of the state employees credit union, and I know that's even conflating it even more because it's still state enterprise at that point. But I think the point is that it's a different economic model than for a bank like Goldman Sachs or something, which operates on a for-profit or more of an exploitative model. Would you say that to be true?
Yeah. Yeah, and it's like with all the banking and finance organizations, it's like there's a difference between the legitimate economy versus the economy which is independent. Like there are barely any enterprises, especially banking and finance organizations that aren't in some way government controlled, because they have to go through licensing, get permits, get zoned, get chartered, and all that stuff. So credit unions, which is one of the fastest growing sector of banking right now, it just enables customers, ordinary people, to have a bit of control over how their credit unions being run.
So I guess in a way that would be, you might say that's the point of a cooperative, is to give ordinary people or workers that work at a firm more say in how the firm is run, as opposed to what they call false dichotomy between the corporate world where your bosses run everything and your investors run everything, or the state world where the government runs everything, and neither way you're really empowered.
Right. And so if you don't mind, I'm going to go into a few positive things about cooperatives according to their members and proponents. One thing is that they help address market failure. They create and maintain employment. They help keep jobs near the communities and stabilize the communities because they're oriented towards the community, and they often use local resources and materials in their production. They also have a reputation for treating their employees fairly and paying them well, having good labor practices and safety and health standards. They provide educational opportunities to members and workers, and also to the public. According to the UN, this is a 20-year-old statistic, but according to the UN, cooperative enterprises help secure the livelihoods of nearly 3 billion people. And as observed in Mondragon, cooperatives being widespread can have the effect of narrowing the gap between the rich and the poor, eliminating extreme wealth and extreme poverty. And co-ops tend to promote solidarity among workers.
Well, that all sounds good. I don't see, unless you're a fanatic, I don't see how anyone could really disagree with any of that. Now, what would you say the benefit of a cooperative-run enterprise is over a state-run enterprise?
Well, I mean, in today's legitimate economy, there's kind of an overlap. So there probably aren't very many examples of a completely non-state involved, cooperatives that aren't somehow interfered with by the state. But what we'd be talking about is an anarchist cooperative. And that's really just, if you get down to the bare nuts and bolts of it, is just any enterprise, or really not even enterprise, any activity undertaken by a number of people in cooperation with each other to engage in trade and provide service to customers, and provide a lower cost to buyers. And whereas if you had some kind of state control and meddling and interference, the state would want to be involved to make sure that the people starting the business would have to go through the state approved measures, like as I mentioned before, permits and charters and zoning, and essentially have to pay a feudalist tribute to the state in order to have the privilege to exist. And since we have problems like not enough term limits and a political class in this country, in this government, there's not a lot that it just requires so much more from enterprises to have to pay more to get along, and those costs that they pay to government in order to have the privilege to exist gets passed on to consumers and raises prices, and that's what they want to do. They primarily want to provide a service for a lower cost because they want to lower what's known as the cost of the limit of price principle. And it's just selling something for what it costs to produce, keeping in mind that the labor required to produce it is the primary root of the value of the product.
Okay. All right. You just said you dropped a whole lot of knowledge on us right there. Let's see if I can dissect it. But first of all, you use the A word. You mentioned anarchism. Now, does that mean you want to strap a bomb to yourself and blow up City Hall?
No, not necessarily.
Not necessarily. Not necessarily.
Yeah.
Oh, very good. Very good. Very good. So when you're talking anarchism, you're speaking more of a European idea of what that means, or I understand that's a big subject that I know I could get into a lot with you if we wanted to go there. But in short, I don't know whether to call you a dirty pinko or a fascist. So why don't you help me on that?
Right. Well, anarchism, as I define it, it's not necessarily chaos. It's not necessarily a lack of order. It's not even necessarily a lack of rules. It's just a lack of rulers. It's a lack of dictators. It's a lack of it's the non-dictatorship principle. You can't have fair elections if you have a dictator. So anarchism wants to get rid of the person who makes the rules or the person who makes the decisions, and it's kind of that everyone makes the rules, but no one makes the rules. Everyone has a place in helping make the rules, and yet there aren't everyone is essentially their own ruler, and everyone chooses which rules govern them.
Okay. Well, okay. So that sounds once again like you're some kind of weird synthesis between a hippie and Hitler or something like that. But I think for the sake of the people that are listening, they have a decent idea of what we're talking about now. So, so cooperatives, would you say that cooperatives are gaining steam in the world, or do you think that there's less cooperatives than there has been in the past?
I think they are gaining steam. Like I said before, credit unions are growing, and with the number of major banks being whittled down, with all the takeovers and the legislation that's forcing them to kind of grow into a monopoly or oligopoly, just 4 major banks that are essentially running the whole country, the whole world. People are looking for alternatives. And I think that alternative, it's not necessarily going to be in only cooperatives and cooperation, but in what's called co-opetition. It's kind of a synthesis between cooperation and competition. It's competition in the sense of enterprises existing separately and autonomously and independently, like a cooperative, but working with each other, but not necessarily working against each other with the intent of shutting each other down, but co-opting with/against each other, kind of in kind of a tentative kind of way to undermine the power of monopolies and oligopolies.
I see. Well, that all sounds very good. That all sounds very good to me. And you hit on something that's always been one of my main points in my videos, which is the problem with international banks that are basically monopolizing not even business at this point, but governments across the world, and in doing a lot to stifle the individual and the collective will of the people in many countries across the world, such as Greece, and we're seeing it in our country more and more too. So I guess whereas my philosophy would be more break the banks, which is what I repeat every single time I say anything on the show, yours might be more withdrawal from the banks and do not participate with them. Is that correct?
Yeah, and when you say withdrawal, like you know, cooperatives and leftists of all kind, they all want to have they all want to be able to boycott. But I've argued, and libertarians argue, that boycott is essentially impossible since we're being taxed by government, and government is spending our money on whatever it damn well pleases, with a minimum amount of influence from the part of us, the public. So, like, essentially, to have a successful boycott, we basically business alliances and the chambers of commerce across the country and various levels of government.
All right. Well, that sounds exciting, and it sounds like it's a lot of work. So hopefully something will be done, and we'll start moving in that direction in the future. I want to thank you, Joe, for coming on the show. I think you've informed us of a lot of things we didn't know. So thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Ryan O'Dowd, and this has been the Black Can Communique saying, fuck the banks.